What is good, dudes? Lady dudes, welcome back to Just Nuts here, guys. Today, we're doing a little video talking about every deck you should be worried about. Not worried, well, maybe worried's not the right word, but every deck you should be aware of coming into the WCQ season. This is the pinnacle out of the year in terms of, like, you know, the months in which this is like the pinnacle of competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, where you're going to be facing the highest level of players, and mostly just the best decks. So pretty much this video is going to go over every single deck you should be aware of, know how the deck you plan on running matches up against that deck, its strengths, the weaknesses, what is your win condition if it is different than your normal one, because I know that's a thing for me, is sometimes when I play a weird deck, the win condition can change depending on the matchup if it is a strange matchup. So we'll get into that here. Remember, this isn't a video that's going to be telling you how to take on every matchup, because I don't know what deck you're playing. I don't know what tools you have at your disposal or anything. We're just talking about generically what are the decks you need to be aware of. So we're pretty much just talking about the tier 2 and above stuff. So I left out some stuff that I believe is tier 2.5. I think that there's a chance you could run into it, but if you're playing a tier 2 or higher deck, you have to assume your engine in terms of consistency or power or, you know, disruption, removal, all that stuff is stronger than the deck you're playing against. So even if you don't know the matchup that well, hopefully just the fact that your deck is better should give you the edge anyway. All right, starting with the decks, we're going to start from the top. Pretty basic stuff. Salamangreats, we've seen them for the last couple months. They're very link heavy. They do small combos that don't end in a ton of board presence, but they're super consistent, and every turn they'll just establish that like same, middle-sized board, and it can be very tough to grind against, so you kind of have to blow them out. But yeah, Salamangreats, we know we have to be good against them. Next up is Orcas. The only reason I have Orcas second instead of first is because I haven't really seen what Orcas can do all the way as far as like the more pure variants. With Dingirsu and stuff, I wouldn't be surprised if it's the best deck, but I just haven't seen it in action like I've seen Sally's, so that's why I have them here. Learning the best ways to work around Dingirsu, to work around their combos. They cannot Azathoth anymore, which is good, which means even though you have a way to try and break their board, they can't Azathoth you out of nowhere, ending your monster plays for the whole turn, which is really nice, but also the deck's still really good, especially with Crescendo as well. Really, really strong deck, so know your matchups here as well. Next up, we have Thunder Dragon. They've been around for a while now, almost 6 months. Wow. It's long. Did not feel that quite that long, but yeah, it's been probably over 6 months now since we got Thunder Dragons. They're really good. They set up pretty nasty boards, some of the pretty much the strongest boards in our game today, so watch out for that. If you're a deck that searches a lot, know that you should probably have a decent side deck for this, because you're probably going to see a couple of them in a big tournament, and you can't give away 2-3 free rounds to a terrible matchup. You got to have a side that's going to give you a chance. So yeah, Thunder Dragon here. Then we move to Sky Striker Ace Ray and the Sky Striker Bunch. They took probably, if not Thunder Dragons, Sky Strikers took like one of the biggest hits on the last ban list, getting Kagari put down to 1. And what I think that does is I think that solidifies the win condition for a lot of decks. So Sky Strikers always grinded well. They still grind pretty well, but not as well. So I think a lot of decks will try and exploit that and make sure that that is their win condition now. Instead of kind of overwhelming strikers with a lot of offense, there may be an argument for trying to just outlast them in the grind, because they can't just make Kagari every turn and get back a ton of, and get a free card back every single turn, which is nice. They just have the one. So know that as well. This is even longer Thunder. This is over like a year now that we've had strikers. So we should know this matchup by now, but also learning how different it is with Kagari at 1, seeing if that changes the way you approach the matchup as well. Same thing with Thunder Dragons. I didn't say it was Thunder Dragons, but they lost a Phantom Sky Blaster to 1. Didn't they take another hit as well? Can't remember. Didn't they have something else that kind of hit them? I don't know. Whatevs. Also, I didn't say, but Super Poly is something to keep in mind as well. Obviously, against Salamangreats, against Thunder Dragons, against Orcas, there are a couple decks that card can be multi-versatile against, especially if you don't need your extra deck space. And you can allow some of those slots to go towards Super Poly targets. So keep that in mind as well. Then we move to the Tier 2 stuff. I would say those 4 decks are kind of like the solidified Tier 1s. We'll talk about more of that. And then we're moving to the Tier 2s, 1.5s. It's debatable, but I think these are the ones. There's a ton. Super versatile format. We'll start with Subtears. This is one of the more strange strategies you'll run into. Very, very control-heavy strategy that plays trap cards. Just know where your hand traps work here because you have to maximize that. You're really trying to hit Guru. You're trying to keep Guru off the field if you can to keep him from just continually flipping up. That's why Ogre actually is decent in the matchup. You just hit Guru, and Guru's gone, which is nice. We have Dynamo, not Dynamo, we have True Draco. It's another deck that's been around a long, long time, but it's very consistent. The power's not insane, but it can go first and second, which is a really nice, just thing to have as a deck, period. And yeah, it's just Old Faithful. It's going to consistently give them the results, so you can't really bank on them bricking all too much. So that's one thing. There, just a classic back row removal kind of side in kind of stuff. Nothing crazy. Next up, I have Pendulums, and this is just going to be all Pendulums because if I could make a whole video just talking about what Pendulums to be ready for, because I could have 4 or 5 different archetypes right there. Obviously, know how the new Endymion stuff works. Maybe go back and make sure you know how the actual Pendulum Magicians work, the Zephyra engine works, because those are engines you could very well see mixed in with the Endymion stuff, and just know where the best place for certain hand traps. Usually it's Electromite, but there are other situations where it can hurt them as well. And just know it, because this can be outside of Thunder Dragons and Guard Dragons, the most explosive deck in the game. So keep an eye on them. Do not sleep on them, or they will get you. Next, we have Trick Stars. This is a very good strategy against decks that set back row because they have the built-in field spell that hurts there. So make sure if you are playing a deck that does play back row, more stun control deck, that this deck is a bad matchup. Learn what you need to stop when. It's kind of the same for every deck. Know your matchups here. Know how they can burn you. Always keep in mind that sometimes I've had times where I thought I stopped their play, except they went into battle phase and crushed me, and then they ended up burning me for game. Even though I had board present, I had board control the entire duel, they were just able to get in for one battle phase and then just burn me out from there. So keep an eye on that when you're playing against this deck. This deck is very dangerous. Burning Abyss. This is one of the decks that you should keep your eye on. Not the most, because I think it'll be there the most, but in the sense that I think it changed the most recently. Because of the addition of Cherubini, this deck gets a huge explosive boost in terms of consistency, power, and utility because of Cherubini. And it's super easy to make Link 2 with an insanely good effect. You cannot ash Cherubini's effect because it sends to grave as cost. You have to Veiler or Impermanence on summon. You cannot ash when they activate the effect. So very, very dangerous card. Very, very cool card. I love Burning Abyss. Keep an eye on it. I think this card makes it a solidified tier 2. And because it has such a strong following as just a classic deck that a lot of people love, you be prepared to see a decent amount of this as well. Next up is Prank Kids. This is one of the lower end ones, I will admit, but it always seems like when you see somebody giving a top deck list and they're talking about their matchups, there's always one Prank Kid in there. And Prank Kids are dangerous. If you don't know how they work, you should, because they are a very, very unique deck in the way that they function, the way that they play. Hand traps do not really affect them all that much, very minimally. And they grind pretty well. If they get their plays going, it's going to be very hard to stop them. So just keep an eye on them because they are dangerous. Just know how they work, because if you've never played the deck and you don't know how they work, this could be your downfall in a big tournament, especially in later rounds. So just be aware of what they do, how they work, so you have a better chance to know how to stop them in doing that. Next up is Invoked. This could be a couple different things. This could be Mech Knight Invoked. This could be Sky Striker Invoked. We've seen a little bit of that running around. But Invoked as well. We'll throw that in here. The engine's pretty basic. You have the Searching Field spell, the Searching Monster on normal summon, and, you know, and then the fusion monsters in the extra deck. Purgatrio being very dangerous offensively, and Makaba being a very good defensive, just negate card. So just, you know, be aware. The deck is very explosive. If you don't set up very, super strong boards, but you are going first deck, be aware that this can be very dangerous, because this could be one of those decks that if you just set up a subpar board, you could just get OTK'd, which is very dangerous. So, you know, just know the matchup, and it's been getting a couple tops here and there, so just know. Another deck that got a very recent boost on the last ban list is Dinosaurs, with Miscellaneous Source coming off the ban list completely, going from 1 copy to 3, and that being a card that protects Oviraptor from every hand trap in the game, which is phenomenal. Because like you think about hand traps, and like literally all of them can hit Oviraptor, more or less. Not all of them, but like, you know, the main 4, you'd say 5, all have an effect on Oviraptor. So that's why, you know, he's your best starter. You want to make sure that you can handle that. You'll be ready for that. So I don't know. The deck's very explosive, kind of like Mech Knight Invoke. Just make sure, if you are a deck that does not set up an insane board, make sure you set up a way that can give you a chance to stop Dinosaurs. Or if you are a deck that is prone to going second OTK strategies, there are a couple in tier 2 lingering around that you could run into. 1, 2, 3, 4 at the most, I would say. And it could ruin your day because you just didn't prepare for somebody who wants to go second and thrives on it. So just be aware of that. So Dinosaurs. Altergeist. Altergeist are very good as well. They've actually been doing really well in the regional scene. Like, I feel like every single regional I've seen, we're seeing like 1 or 2 Altergeist popping up there. They're just getting better. I just don't think people are citing as much back row hate as they were when Altergeist were in, you know, the top 3, top 4 decks. So I think that's why we're seeing them come out of the woodworks again. They're strong. They're just like not the most consistent control strategy, but you know, when they get their setup, it's very, very hard, and they can grind decently well. It's all about if they can get there, they're there, and it's tough to beat them once they are. So Altergeist, mark them down. Then we have probably the most unique deck out of all the ones, and the newest deck, the deck that is actually just straight up new, we've never seen before. Mystic Mine. It sucks, but yeah, you should know it. And I'm not saying this because I think this is a tier 2 strategy. I don't. I'm not saying this because I think, you know, you could see a bunch, but I think you could see 1, maybe 2 in a big tournament, because there are those players that just love to play the cheese. They love to just play decks that piss off their opponents. I know those kinds of people. I'm sure you guys know those kinds of people as well. And I think you should just know how it works. Again, kind of like Prank Kids, it's a very, very different strategy in the way it works. You just need to have back row. You need a ton of back row hate to do it. I mean, you don't need it, but like you should have some back row. If not a ton of back row, you should have ways that you can get a lot of draw power and possibly draw into back row fairly easily and consistently, so that you can just, as the duel goes on, continually just keep Mystic Mine off the field. Because if you do, you probably just win. Like, the duel's probably just over if you keep Mystic Mine off the field. So that's your whole goal. Then we have Cyber Dragon. So kind of like Dinosaurs, kind of like Mech Knights, or not Mech Knight Invoked. Cyber Dragon is that other strategy that really likes to go first and thrives on it, because it's all about just let you do whatever you want and then just rip it away. So you have no resources left over, or even if you have resources, you don't have the extra deck monsters anymore to like go into. So they make you like use that, and then they just get rid of it, easy peasy. So Cyber Dragons, very, very dangerous. They also can go first a little bit. I mean, all 3 of the decks can actually do a little something going first. They prefer to go second for sure. But going first isn't the worst, and I've seen it because I've dueled against a Cyber Dragon guy who tried to catch me off guard when he was playing against me in Subterrors. Tried to go first and set up a board. He actually set up a decent board. I was able to get through it, but I drew a very good going second hand. So what are you going to do? Yeah. So Cyber Dragons, be careful. Next up is Crusadia Guard Dragon. I think this was one of the lower tier ones as well, kind of with Prank Kids. It's very weak to hand traps, but it's like a very consistent 2-card combo, and if it gets there, it's there and it's staying because it's kind of like Thunder Dragons, huge board, one of the highest ceilings in the game in terms of being able to just set up a monstrous board. You're not going to be able to break through with multiple negates and everything. So just keep them in mind, you know. If you play hand traps, make sure you know where the hand traps are going, because one hand trap, 2 hand traps will get you very far against this deck. So, Crusadia. And then the last deck I have here is Dark Warriors. Oh, you know what? I feel like I missed one. That's fine. We'll talk about it in just a sec. Dark Warriors, probably the lowest tier. This one is arguably tier 2.5, but again, it's just one of those decks, super high ceiling. If it gets there, it's just going to set up a board you're not going to be able to touch. So know how to not let them do that. It's one of those decks that if you go second with no hand trap, they might just, you might just lose because the board's going to be too strong. So keep in mind, Dark Warriors. Don't forget about them. And the last deck, I forgot to put a picture here, but ABCs is one as well. We've seen it. It gets a top here and there, not crazy amount, but it's an own deck. Very, very strong strategy when it gets going. A very, very strong boss monster. Just a quick effect to banish, which is insanely powerful. And the deck can grind because ABC can just keep tagging out and giving you more and more pieces, which is awesome. So make sure you keep an eye on ABCs as well. It's a lower tier one, but I think you should still know what it does and know how to take it on. But guys, that's pretty much it. I think that ends up being 17, maybe 18 decks. It's a very diverse meta. I wouldn't be surprised if you see any of these decks at a big tournament, especially WCQ. It's going to be huge this year. And yeah, I can do another series if you want me to go in depth on how to go about taking on some of these strategies, you know, individually. But this is just a video on just every deck you probably should know, you know, the bare minimum of how the deck works, so that you can, you know, figure out the interactions as you go, based on, you know, educated guesses. We'll say educated guesses. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me know if you think I missed anything. I don't think so. I mean, if there's other stuff, like I said at the beginning, if it's a deck that's a lower tier than like tier 2, you're probably just like, you don't need to know the ins and outs of that deck. Like, you're probably just in a position where your deck has a stronger engine in some way, power, consistency, utility, and you should be able to beat them just in you know, in terms of your deck being better. But and then you can figure out how their deck works along the way. And that's how I've approached decks that I've never really dueled before and don't know too much about. It's just focus on learning game one. And then if you can get away with a win because your deck's just better, awesome. And then you know more from there and you just learn as you go. But yeah, learning is the key. Just keep an open mind when you're doing those decks. I don't want to ramble too much. I always ramble too much at the end of videos. But thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, go and subscribe for more stuff from me in the future. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace.